The glass shattered before anyone could scream. It hit the marble floor of Club Obsidian in a burst of expensive vodka and ice, and every head in the VIP section turned, except Alex Oluwas. He didn't flinch, didn't even look down. He just kept his eyes on the man across the room, the one with the briefcase, the one who had been watching Stella Fashademi for the past 40 minutes with the focused patience of someone reviewing a purchase. Stella didn't notice. She was dancing. She danced the way she did everything, with her whole self, long straight hair catching the light like something poured, her black dress moving with her like it had been told to behave. She laughed at something Adiz said, threw her head back. The strobe light caught her face and held it there for half a second like even the club's electricity knew to pay attention. "She's beautiful," Adiz shouted over the music, leaning into Stella's ear. "Stop," Stella laughed. "I'm serious. Alex is a fool. You know that, right? A beautiful fool who doesn't deserve." "Adiz. I'm just saying." Stella shook her head, but she was still smiling. She looked across the room at Alex. He was standing with two men she didn't recognize, laughing at something, his thick dreads pulled to one side, his shirt open one button too many. He was gorgeous in the way that dangerous things are gorgeous, all surface, all draw, and absolutely no warning label. He caught her looking, winked. She smiled back, felt the familiar warmth spread through her chest that she had spent 3 years mistaking for love. He held up 2 fingers. 2 minutes. She nodded and turned back to Adiz. She didn't see him walk to the bar. Didn't see him reach into his jacket pocket for the small folded paper. Didn't see his thumb hover over her glass. She didn't see any of it. She trusted him. That was the whole problem. That had always been the whole problem. Alex brought the drinks with a smile so clean it should have been criminal. He handed Stella hers first, fingers brushing hers deliberately, and she took it without looking because she always took what he gave without looking. That was what 3 years of loving the wrong person did to your instincts. It taught you to receive and not to question, to drink and not to taste. "To us," Alex said, holding up his glass. "To us," Stella said and drank. The first thing she noticed was the music. It changed. Not the song was the same. But the music changed, the way a room changes when someone opens a window in winter. The bass became something she could feel but couldn't locate. The lights softened at the edges. Adiz's voice reached her from somewhere slightly too far away, like a call across water. Stella blinked, put her hand on the bar. "Baby." Alex was beside her, hand on her lower back, steadying. "Come on, let's get some air." "Something's," she started. "Alex, something's wrong. You just had too much. Come on." She let him steer her because that is what you do with the man you love. You let him steer. Her heels on the floor sounded strange, muffled, like walking through a dream. She registered the crowd thinning. A back corridor. Colder air. A single hanging light bulb that swung slowly. She leaned against the wall and tried to focus. There was a man, standing 10 feet away. He had a briefcase open at his side, and he was looking at her with the kind of attention that should have set every alarm in her body screaming. But the alarms were underwater. Everything was underwater. Alex stepped away from her. She watched him cross to the man. Watched something pass between them. An envelope. Thick, folded. Watched Alex count without taking the money fully out. Watched him nod once. "Alex." Her voice came out then. "Alex, what?" He looked at her then. Just once. And in that look was everything she had refused to see for 3 years. The absence. No guilt. No hesitation. No love. Just the mild acknowledgement of a man looking at something he was finished with. "Alex." And then the corridor changed again. Not the light. Not the temperature. Something else. Something that walked through the door at the far end of the corridor like the air itself had been reorganized around his arrival. He was tall. Dressed in all black, suit jacket open, long dark hair falling loose past his jaw, and his eyes, even from here, even through the haze of whatever Alex had put in her drink, his eyes were the clearest thing in the room. They moved fast. Scanned the corridor in less than a second. The man with the briefcase. Alex holding the envelope. Stella against the wall. He understood everything in one look. He turned to the man beside him and said 3 words in Korean. "거래를 취소해." Cancel the transaction. The man with the briefcase laughed. Started to say something. One of the tall man's associates stepped forward and took the man's wrist in both hands and bent it at an angle that ended the sentence immediately. The briefcase hit the floor. Papers scattered. Alex stepped forward. His voice was loud, Lagos sharp, trying to reclaim authority in a space that had already moved on from him. "Oga, this no concern you." The tall man didn't look at Alex. He was already walking towards Stella. She watched him come. She had enough presence of mind left to feel something, not fear. Something older and more animal than fear. Recognition, maybe. The kind that exists before language. He stopped in front of her. This close, she could see the line of his jaw, the faint scar beneath his left ear, the absolute stillness of him. No urgency. No performance. Just a man who had made his decision and was executing it. Stella grabbed his lapel with both hands. She didn't know why. Her hands just moved, found fabric, held on. Her knuckles went white. She looked up at him, and the words that came out of her mouth were not the words of a woman who understood what was happening. They were the words of something deeper, something that had already decided. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't let them take me." Something moved across his face. Not pity. Something older than pity and harder to name. Something that looked, for just a fraction of a second, like a man recognizing a sound he thought he'd never hear. He reached out. One arm behind her shoulders, one beneath her knees. He lifted her like she weighed nothing. She didn't fight it. She pressed her face against his chest and closed her eyes, and the last thing she heard before the dark came fully was Alex's voice behind them, clipped and furious, already negotiating for the return of his money. Morning came to Seoul like an apology. Gray light through floor-to-ceiling glass. The Hangang River visible in the distance, flat and steel-colored. A penthouse so large and so quiet it seemed designed specifically to make you aware of your own smallness. Stella opened her eyes. White ceiling. White sheets. She was wearing a white oversized shirt that was not hers. She sat up slowly and the room tilted, righted itself, tilted again. Her dress was gone. The air smelled like sandalwood and something colder that she couldn't name. Then she saw him. He was sitting on the couch across the room. Jacket off. Sleeves rolled to his elbows. One ankle crossed over his knee, a phone in his hand, watching her with an expression that gave away nothing. He looked like a man who had been sitting there for hours and had not once considered leaving. Stella pulled the duvet to her chest. "Where am I?" "Seoul." His English was precise, slightly accented. Each word placed deliberately. "My residence." "You are safe." "Where are my clothes?" "Your dress had a tracking device sewn into the hem." "Your boyfriend's insurance policy." "I had it removed." She stared at him. Her mouth opened. Closed. The fog was still there but thinner now, and through it she was beginning to reconstruct the corridor. The briefcase, the envelope, Alex's face at the moment he looked at her like she was already gone. She felt the knowledge arrive not all at once but in pieces, each one heavier than the last. She got out of the bed. Her legs were unsteady but they held. She crossed the room. She slapped him. Open palm. Hard. The sound was flat and sharp in the quiet room. His head turned with the impact. He didn't move to stop it. Didn't raise a hand. Didn't step back. He absorbed it with the patience of someone who understood that they had earned it simply by being the nearest standing man. He looked back at her. "Get out," she said. Her voice was shaking. "This is my residence. Then I'll leave. Your passport is missing. Your phone has no SIM. It was removed along with the tracking device. Your friend Adiz is trying to reach you from Lagos. We can." "Stop." She held up a hand. "Stop talking." She turned, walked to the bathroom, went inside and locked the door. Then she sat down on the cold tile floor with her back against the door and her arms around her knees and she cried. Not a dramatic cry, not the kind that looks like anything. The quiet, disciplined kind. The kind of crying that comes from years of practice, from learning early that making noise when you hurt only invited more of the wrong kind of attention. She cried until the tile was warm beneath her. On the other side of the door, she heard nothing. No footsteps. No voice. No attempt to speak through the wood. Just quiet. After a while, a soft sound, fabric on floor, and then silence again. She opened the door 20 minutes later. On the floor just outside a tray. Water. Sliced fruit. 2 white tablets for the headache she hadn't mentioned. No note. No explanation. She stood in the doorway and looked at it. Looked at the room. He had moved to the far end. Was standing at the window now, his back to her, looking out at the river. She sat down on the floor of the doorway and ate. Alone. In a stranger's penthouse in a city she didn't know. And somehow, impossibly, inexplicably, it felt like the most tenderness anyone had shown her in years. His name was Jaewook. She learned this not from him but from Miho, the man who knocked on the penthouse door at noon with documents, a change of clothes and a bag, her size, how they knew she didn't ask, and an explanation delivered in careful, respectful English that told her 3 things. That she was not a prisoner, that returning to Lagos right now was not safe, and that Jaewook had requested she remain until other arrangements could be made. Requested, Stella repeated. Miho's expression didn't change. Yes. And if I decline the request? Miho looked at the floor briefly, then back at her. He said to tell you that the door is unlocked. It has been unlocked since you arrived. She didn't leave. Not because she couldn't. Because she had nowhere to go that Alex didn't already know, and because some quiet animal part of her had noticed, the door being unlocked was not nothing. Men who meant harm did not leave doors unlocked. She stayed. Days became a week. The penthouse revealed itself slowly. A kitchen she cooked in when the chef's presence felt like surveillance. A balcony she sat on at night watching Seoul breathe below her. A library wall of books she couldn't read because they were all in Korean, which somehow made her feel less judged by them. Jae-wook moved around her like she was a current he was choosing not to disturb. He worked. He took calls in Korean and sometimes Japanese, his voice low and precise and completely indifferent to the outcomes of nations. He had dinner brought in and set a second place without asking. He didn't make conversation, but he didn't ignore her either. It was something in between that she didn't have a word for. On the 8th night, she asked him directly. She had been sitting at the kitchen island watching him read. He read physical books, always, a detail that struck her as somehow honest. And the question had been building since the corridor, since the morning after, since every moment in between. What do you want from me? He looked up. Nothing, he said. People don't take in strangers for nothing. I didn't take you in. I removed you from a situation. And kept me here. You stayed. She held his gaze. He didn't look away. He never looked away. That was one of the things she was learning about him. Most men looked away eventually, retreated into their phones or their ego or their hunger. Jae-wook looked at her like looking was a thing he had decided to do and saw no reason to stop. Why? She said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, because the door of that corridor was mine. My territory. What happened there was done under my name without my knowledge. He paused. That is not something I can leave undone. It wasn't the answer she had expected. It was also she realized slowly, not a lie. She went back to her room. Lay on the ceiling for a long time, looking at the ceiling, and tried to locate the part of her that was still frightened of him. It was there. Smaller than it should have been. If you're already hooked, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss what happens next. Meanwhile, in Lagos, Alex Oluwa sat in a hotel room with 2 phones and 1 plan. He had lost $60,000 in that corridor. Not the money in the envelope, the buyer never paid. He had lost the deal, the contact, and the girl in that order, and the girl was the most expensive part because the girl was not the end of the transaction. The girl was the beginning of one. He rolled a blunt. Let it sit unlit between his teeth. The name Jae-wook wasn't new to him. Lagos Underground knew the name the way it knew weather. Not always present, but always worth preparing for. Korean. Old money turned dirty turned empire. Soul-based, but with fingers everywhere fingers could reach for profit. Alex lit the blunt. Stella was not in love with him. He had known this for over a year. Love was not the point. The point was that Stella was manageable, and manageable women were the most valuable currency he knew. You didn't sell what you loved. You sold what you could replace. He pulled out his phone. Dialed. I need her back, he said when the call connected. She's with Jae-wook, the voice said. I know where she is. Then you know what that means. Alex exhaled smoke. Get me a team in Seoul. I'll handle the rest. He hung up. Looked at the ceiling. Somewhere in Seoul, Stella Fashademi was sleeping in a penthouse that wasn't hers, not knowing that the man who had sold her was already buying her back. He picked up the blunt again. He didn't feel anything about it. That was the most honest thing about Alex Oluwa. He genuinely, completely, in the deepest available part of him, felt nothing about it at all. The first time Stella sat beside Jae-wook at a meeting, she didn't know she was being watched. Not by him, by everyone else. The room was on the 43rd floor of a glass building in Gangnam, all chrome and restraint, and the 6 men at the table had the careful, measured faces of people who earned their money in ways that didn't appear on tax documents. Jae-wook had told her nothing about the meeting. He had simply appeared at the penthouse door at 9 in the morning, looked at her standing in the kitchen in one of the borrowed shirts, and said, "Get dressed. You're coming with me." She had stared at him for 3 full seconds. "Excuse me? It is safer than leaving you here alone. Alex's men have been in Seoul for 4 days. That was how she found out. Not gently, not with any particular cushioning. Just that Alex's men have been in Seoul for 4 days, delivered with the same tone one might use to comment on traffic. She got dressed. The meeting was in Korean. Jae-wook didn't translate and she didn't ask him to. She sat beside him and watched the room instead, reading the things that didn't need language. The way 2 of the men at the far end of the table kept their eyes slightly too long on her. Not desire exactly. Assessment. The calculation of men who had been told to expect nothing and had found something. Halfway through the meeting, the man directly across from Jaiwook, late 50s, silver at his temples, a watch that cost more than most houses, reached across the table and covered Stella's hand with his. The gesture was brief and practiced, the move of someone who did things like this regularly and expected them to land without objection. Stella started to pull back. She didn't need to. Jaiwook's hand was already there. It moved slowly, covering hers completely, thumb resting on her wrist with the specific pressure of a full stop at the end of a sentence. He didn't look at the silver-haired man, didn't raise his voice, didn't change his expression by a single degree. He just moved his hand and let the architecture of it speak. The silver-haired man removed his hand. The meeting continued. Stella kept her face still and her eyes forward and tried to process the specific warmth of Jaiwook's hand over hers, and the fact that it remained there for the rest of the meeting without once letting go. In the car afterward, she asked him about it. Who was that man? Business contact. What was that about? He was testing the borders of something that didn't belong to him. She looked at him. He was watching the road. The Seoul afternoon was doing things with light that Lagos never did. Flatter, whiter, more diffuse, like the sky here had decided to be honest. I'm not yours, she said. No. So why? Because you were in my company. He paused. In my world, what happens to someone beside me is my responsibility. It has nothing to do with ownership. She turned to look out the window. Thought about that for a while. 3 years with Alex, and the word responsibility had never appeared in that man's vocabulary in relation to her. What does that mean exactly? Your world. Jaiwook was quiet for a moment. It means, he said finally, that I have a responsibility toward the people beside me. That I take that seriously. That I have for a long time. But not ownership. No. She believed him. That was the thing that unsettled her most. She believed him, and she had no idea what to do with that, because believing men was not something her body had agreed to in quite some time. That night, she stood on the balcony for 2 hours watching Seoul move below her and tried to find the edge of what she was feeling. Not gratitude. She knew what gratitude felt like. She'd been performing it for years in place of real emotion. Not fear. Not the sharp pull of attraction that she was used to weaponizing against herself. Something quieter than all of those. Something that felt uncomfortably like safety. She didn't trust it. In the second week, Adiz arrived. She came off the plane from Lagos with 2 suitcases, an attitude the size of a continent, and the expression of a woman who had been worried sick for 10 days and had converted that worry entirely into volume. Stella Ifioma Fashademi, she said, in the penthouse doorway, looking at her best friend standing barefoot in a Korean billionaire's kitchen. Start talking. Stella opened her mouth. No, wait, Adiz said, holding up a hand. She looked around the penthouse slowly. The floor-to-ceiling glass, the river view, the architecture that whispered money in 5 languages. Okay, now talk. Stella talked. For 2 hours, sitting on the kitchen counter while Adiz paced, she told all of it. The drink, the corridor, the tracking device in the hem of her dress, the locked bathroom, the tray of fruit outside the door, the meeting, the hand. Adiz listened with increasing speed of pacing. When Stella finished, Adiz stopped walking, stood still, then said, "Where is he?" His office. He works late on. The Korean man who picked you up off a club floor and has not once tried anything, has left you with your door unlocked for 2 weeks, sends food and clothes, and keeps men off you at meetings. Where is he? Adiz. I'm asking a sincere question. You're asking with your judgment face. My judgment face is saying, Adiz said, pointing at her own expression, that Alex Oliwa sold you like a used phone, and this man won't even charge you rent. Those are different categories of man, Stella. Stella looked at the floor. It's complicated. What's complicated about it? He runs the Korean Mafia, Adiz. Adiz paused. Oh. Another pause. Yeah, okay, that's a complication. She sat down on the counter beside Stella. Knocked shoulders with her. But he's not wrong, though. Is he? Stella didn't answer. Which was its own kind of answer. Jaiwook found them like that. 2 women on his kitchen counter, eating crackers, speaking in rapid Yoruba that rose and fell like music he couldn't follow. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Then Adiz looked at him. There was a silence of approximately 3 seconds in which Adiz conducted a visible assessment. You're Jaiwook, she said. Yes. I'm Adiz. Her best friend. I'm going to need you to understand that if anything happens to her, the consequences will be substantial and sustained. Jaiwook held her gaze, then nodded once, with exactly the same gravity he used in boardrooms. Understood, he said. Something shifted slightly in Adiz's expression. She looked at Stella, looked back at him. Then she slid off the counter, picked up her crackers, and said, "I'll be in the guest room. Continue whatever this is." She left. Jae-wook looked at Stella. Stella looked at Jae-wook. The kitchen was quiet. "Your friend," he said, "is a force of nature," Stella said. "Yes." The corner of his mouth moved. Just slightly. Just enough to be visible. "I see that." It was the closest thing to a smile she had seen from him. It lasted approximately 1 second. But she catalogued it immediately, filed it somewhere careful, and tried to understand why it felt like finding a coin in an old coat pocket, small, incidental, and somehow exactly enough. 3 weeks after Stella arrived in Seoul, Jae-wook received a call that lasted 4 minutes and changed the temperature of the penthouse. She heard his voice from the other room. Not the words, but the shift in register. The way it flattened. She had learned already that Jae-wook's danger didn't announce itself. It didn't rise or heat up the way Alex's did. It went in the opposite direction. It got quieter, more contained, like a fire learning to burn cold. She found him in the study, standing at the window, phone still in his hand. "What happened?" she said. He turned. "The man who attempted the transaction in Lagos, my associate. He has been handled." Handled? Yes. She didn't ask what that meant. She had been in his world long enough to understand that some words held weight in proportion to what you didn't add to them. And Alex. Jae-wook looked at her carefully. "Alex is in Seoul." The room got smaller. She felt it. Not panic, not quite, but the body memory of 3 years with that man, of being read constantly and found wanting and paying for it anyway. "Okay," she said. Her voice was steady. "You will not go out alone. Miho will." "Jae-wook." She looked at him directly. "I'm not going to break." He held her gaze. "I know." "Then stop looking at me like I'm something that might." Silence. Then quietly, "It's not what I see." She didn't answer. But she didn't look away either, and in the specific grammar of the thing growing between them, unspoken, unmapped, building in the spaces where words would have been inadequate anyway, that mattered. The seduction happened on a Tuesday. Stella herself would have called it something other than that. A test, maybe. Or a provocation. Or the act of a woman who had been told her whole life that her value was located in a specific place, and who wanted, for once, to know if a man could see anything else. She went to his office in a red dress. Long straight hair loose. Slow walk. Everything she'd been given and had learned to use because using it was the only language certain men would hear. Jae-wook looked up from his desk. She crossed the room. Stood in front of him. Reached out and touched his jaw. Slow, deliberate, eyes on his. His hand came up immediately. Wrapped gently around her wrist. "Don't," he said. She held his gaze. "Why not?" "Because this isn't what you want." "You don't know what I want." "I know what this is." His voice was quiet. Not cold careful. "The way you are careful with something that matters. You're testing something. Whether I'm like him. Whether every man eventually comes for the same thing." He paused. "I'm not going to prove you right." She stared at him. Something cracked slightly. Behind her sternum, a small controlled fracture in something she had built at considerable personal cost. "Then what do you want from me?" she said, and this time the question wasn't the cool strategic one she had used in the kitchen that night. It was raw. She heard it herself, the rawness, and hated it. "I want." He stopped. Set down her wrist gently, like returning something borrowed. Sat back. Looked at her for a long time. "I don't know yet. But not this. Not like this." She turned around. Walked to the window. Stood with her back to him, arms folded. "That's not a real answer," she said. "No," he agreed. "But it's the honest one." The Seoul skyline spread itself below them, indifferent and enormous. Stella stood in it for a long time. Then she sat down on the floor, right there, red dress and all, back against the cold glass. Jae-wook looked at her. Then, without ceremony, he stood up from behind his desk and sat down on the floor beside her. Not touching. Not speaking. Just two people on the floor of a mafia boss's office, sitting in the same silence, which is sometimes the closest two broken people can manage and also somehow enough. If this story is hitting different for you, drop a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. Now let's keep going. The night everything broke open started with a phone call from Lagos. Adis took it first, which was how Stella knew it was bad before she heard a word. Adis' face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds and settled on the fourth one, the one Stella knew. The one that meant, "I don't want to be the person who tells you this." What Stella said. Adis held out the phone. On the screen was a Nigerian gossip page. 40,000 shares. The headline read, "Lagos beauty abandons family to chase Korean money." There was a photo of Stella and Jae-wook outside the Gangnam building, taken from a distance. Clearly Alex's doing. Her mother had seen it. Her mother had called Adiz's mother, who had called Adiz. Her mother was crying. Stella put the phone down on the table very carefully. She stood up. She walked to the study. Jaewook was at his desk. Stella, Adiz called from behind her. She kept walking. She pushed the study door open without knocking. Jaewook looked up. What are we? The words came out before she'd organized them. She was shaking. What is this? Because my mother is crying in Lagos right now because your city is on camera with your face. You defend me in front of people who try to touch me. You have my name on documents. You won't touch me. You won't say what I am to you. And I am standing here. Her voice cracked. She pushed past it. I am standing here not knowing if I'm a charity case or a prisoner or something in between, and I am so tired of not knowing where I stand with a man. I have done that. I have done 3 years of that. I cannot. Her voice broke fully. She didn't try to fix it this time. Am I nothing? Am I still nothing? The last 2 words came out small and entirely real, stripped of everything she'd built over them. Jaewook stood. He crossed the room in 4 steps. He took her face in both hands, not urgently, not like a man claiming something, but like a man holding something he finally stopped pretending he wasn't holding. He looked at her. You are, he said, very quietly, the only thing in my life I have ever been afraid to ruin. She kissed him. He kissed her back, not the fast, hungry kiss of relief, but the slow, deliberate kind. The kind that means I have been making the decision to do this for a long time and I am making it on purpose. Behind them, in the corridor, Adiz stood with her hand over her mouth. Tears running. Making absolutely no attempt to pretend she wasn't watching. The morning after, Seoul was gold. Stella stood on the balcony with both hands around a cup of tea and watched the Hangang River catch the early light and scatter it across the water like something careless and extravagant. Inside, she could hear Jaewook moving. The measured pace of him, unhurried, the soft Korean news on the kitchen television, the sound of coffee being made. These were ordinary sounds. She stood in them like standing in warm water. Adiz appeared beside her. Said nothing for almost a full minute, which was some kind of personal record. Then so. Don't, Stella said. I'm not saying anything. You are saying everything. I'm just standing here. Adiz paused. How do you feel? Stella looked at the river. Like I need to be careful. Or, Adiz said carefully, like you could just let something good be good without already preparing for it to be taken from you. Stella didn't answer. The tea was warm in her hands. Inside, Jaewook had turned off the news. The apartment was quiet. She heard him pour coffee, and then heard the small, particular silence of him looking toward the balcony window, knowing she was there, choosing not to interrupt. That choosing. That was the thing. Every man in her life before this had interrupted constantly. Her space, her silence, her plans, her sense of herself. Interruption as ownership. I exist, therefore I enter. Alex had been a master of it. The casual domination of her attention, her time, her body. She had called it love because she didn't know yet what the alternative felt like. This felt like the alternative. She went inside and sat across from Jaewook at the kitchen table, and they drank their morning things in quiet, and it was the most ordinary and most extraordinary thing she had done in years. 3 weeks passed in that warmth. She learned him in pieces, the way you learn a city by walking. No map, just repeated presence until the shape becomes familiar. She learned that he kept his phone face down when she was in the room, which was a courtesy she felt in her bones. That he watched her cook with an attention he didn't bother disguising. That when she laughed, really laughed, the unguarded kind, something happened to the specific set of his shoulders that she had no name for but that she recognized immediately as some sort of arrival. She learned that he spoke to Miho in fast, clipped Korean when they were working and in something slower and more careful when they were alone, the difference between a man at work and a man at rest. She learned that he had a scar on his right hand from something he would not explain but that he touched sometimes when he was thinking. She learned that he read until 2 in the morning and was somehow already awake when she rose at 7, which was either dedication or insomnia and might have been both. She didn't learn how he felt. Not in words. He didn't traffic in those. But one evening she fell asleep on the couch reading and woke to find a blanket had been placed over her at some point. Not thrown, placed, with the careful attention of someone who had done it slowly, not wanting to wake her. She lay still for a long time under that blanket. Then she got up, went to his study, knocked. Come in. She stood in the doorway. Thank you. He looked up. Said nothing. But something in his face acknowledged her completely. She went back to bed. She found out about the pregnancy on a Wednesday in a pharmacy on a street in Mapogu that she couldn't pronounce, with Adiz on video call doing real-time translation of the Korean instructions on the test box. whispering furiously into the phone as though lowering her voice would make this a smaller situation. It says wait 3 minutes, Adiz said. I know what 3 minutes is. Do you want me to talk or be quiet? Be quiet. Adiz was quiet for 47 seconds. What if? Adiz. Silence. The 3 minutes ended. Stella looked at the test. She sat down on the pharmacy bathroom floor in her coat. Put the test face down on the tile beside her. Put both hands flat on her stomach. The fluorescent light above her was the honest, indifferent kind that doesn't care what you're going through. Stella, Adiz said quietly from the phone. What does it say? Stella took a breath. It's positive. Adiz made a sound that was not quite words. I haven't told him, Stella said. She stopped. I need to find the right time. The right words. Okay, Adiz said. Softly. Okay. No rush. It's okay. It didn't feel okay. It felt like the ground had shifted by 3 degrees, and everything she had carefully arranged on it was now at a slight tilt. But she sat with it. Let it be real. Let her hands rest on her stomach, and let the knowledge settle into her the way knowledge does when it's the kind that changes the rest of your life. She didn't know that across the city, in a hotel room she didn't know existed, a woman named Suyan was sitting in front of a mirror removing her earrings and receiving a phone call from someone inside Jaiwook's household. She didn't know that Suyan already knew. Suyan visited on a Friday, gift in hand. She was the kind of beautiful that was also a skill, maintained, deployed, impossible to fault in its execution. She wore cream. She brought flowers in a small box of Korean sweets, and she smiled at Stella with such warmth that Stella felt the warmth and also felt the glass beneath it. They sat in the living room. Adiz positioned herself in the kitchen with a line of sight and a cup of tea and the watchful stillness of a woman at an airport carousel who knows someone has their hand on her bag. I've wanted to meet you properly, Suyan said. Jaiwook speaks of you. Does he? Stella said. In his way. He doesn't say much, as I'm sure you know. She smiled. I've known him a long time. We're very close. He hasn't mentioned you. Something moved behind Suyan's eyes. Microscopic. Gone in an instant. He wouldn't. She set down her teacup. He's very private. That's the thing about Jaiwook. He keeps the people he cares about very close. Sometimes too close. She paused. The next words arrived wrapped in softness and were therefore more dangerous. His world is not an easy one. I've seen what it does to people who weren't built for it. Stella looked at her. I was just thinking, Suyan continued, of your well-being. These situations can become complicated. What situations? Suyan smiled. This one. She gestured vaguely, elegantly, at the penthouse, at Stella, at the space between them that contained everything left unsaid. Stella looked at her for a long time. Then she picked up her own cup. Drank. Set it down. Thank you for the flowers, she said. Suyan held the smile for 2 more beats. Then stood. Of course. Please reach out if you need anything. She gathered her bag. At the door, she turned. Seoul can be very lonely for someone new. Remember that. The door closed behind her. Adiz materialized immediately from the kitchen. I felt that from the other room. She smiled the whole time, Stella said, and I felt like I was being measured for a coffin. Because you were. Adiz sat down. What do you know about her? Nothing. He never mentioned her. I'm going to find out. Adiz already had her phone out. That evening, from the hotel room she occupied 3 miles away, Suyan made 2 calls. The first was to someone inside Jaiwook's network. The second was to a Lagos number. When the Lagos number picked up, she spoke calmly, pleasantly, as though discussing a lunch reservation. Mr. Olyua, she said. I believe we have a shared interest. Shall we discuss it? Alex, in his hotel room in Itaewon, sat up slowly. I'm listening, he said. The nights Stella told Jaiwook. She chose the study. She came in just after 10. He was reading. He looked up and knew immediately from the way she stood in the doorway. She had been carrying something for days. He had felt the weight of it without knowing its shape, and now she was here to put it down. He set down the book. She crossed to the desk. He was already turning in his chair to face her. She stood in front of him. Looked at him. The Seoul night pressed blue and wide against the window behind him. There's something I have to tell you, she said. He waited. I'm pregnant. The study went very still. Jaiwook looked at her. The stillness in him, which she had learned to read now, the different qualities of his quiet, became something else entirely. Not the stillness of calculation. Not the stillness of a man deciding. The stillness of a man who has just received information that rearranges him at a level that is not available to thought. He stood up slowly. He walked to her. He stopped directly in front of her. And then he did something she did not expect. He knelt. Not on one knee but fully, both knees on the study floor, and he looked up at her and put his hands on the front of her thighs, gentle, both palms warm through the fabric, and he looked at her with an expression she had never seen on him. Something open. Something entirely undefended. She didn't know she was crying until she felt it on her face. She put her hands over his. He turned his face and pressed it briefly against her hands, and that one motion contained everything. The weeks of quiet circling, the careful distance kept, the floor of his office, the balcony mornings, every word he had withheld to keep from taking something she hadn't chosen to give. All of it. In one motion. Behind the study door, Adi stood in the corridor with both hands covering her mouth. Silent. Destroyed. If you're crying right now, you are not alone. Subscribe and turn on notifications. This story is not done with you. 1 week after Stella told Jaewook, Alex moved. The day was bright. One of those sole autumn afternoons that is confident in its own beauty. Sharp air, gold light, the city performing its best self. Stella and Adiz were walking in Seongsudong, the kind of neighborhood that felt like an exhale, bookshops, coffee, color. Stella was laughing at something. Her long hair loose, no particular guard up. The first time in weeks, she had felt simply like a woman on a street. The van was white. It moved fast. It happened in 4 seconds. A sliding door. 2 men. A grip on Stella's arm that she fought. She fought hard, nails and elbow and noise. But her feet left the pavement, and the door closed, and the van was gone before Adiz had finished the first syllable of the scream she was already forming. Adiz stood on the empty pavement. Phone already out. In the penthouse, Jaewook's phone rang. He answered before the first ring finished. Heard Adiz's voice, and the specific quality of it, raw and precise and certain, and went completely still. Miho beside him watched the stillness happen. Jaewook, Miho said. Every resource, Jaewook said. His voice had not changed in temperature. It was the same voice he always used. Calm. Particular. Exact. No. He put on his jacket. Looked at himself briefly in the hall mirror. His long hair was tied back. The way he wore it, Stella had noticed when he came to work. When something needed to be done. He walked out. Inside the van, Stella was calm. This was not bravery. It was something that happened below bravery, some floor the body finds when panic has nowhere further to go. She was zip-tied at the wrists. The men were not speaking to her. The van smelled like cigarette smoke and vinyl. She counted. The turns. The time. Estimated direction. 22 minutes. The van stopped. She was walked inside a building, warehouse. From the acoustics of it, the particular way sound absorbed and returned from metal and concrete. A single light suspended from the ceiling. On the metal chair. And Alex. He was standing with his arms folded, dreads loose, wearing the casual confidence of a man who had reassembled his ego after its recent collapse and found it structurally sound. He looked at her the way he had always looked at her, the ownership gaze, the one that had masqueraded as love for 3 years. Stella, he said. She looked at him. Said nothing. You didn't have to make this difficult. Untie my hands, Alex. We're going to have a conversation first. Then have it. He walked toward her, crouched in front of her. This close, she could see him clearly, the sharpness in his eyes, the absence that had always been there and that she had always interpreted as mystery. It wasn't mystery. It was vacancy. A man with beautiful packaging and nothing behind it. Your father, he said, owed a debt. The words landed with the weight of something that had been coming for a long time. What are you saying? I'm saying that Stella Fashademi was not an accident. I'm saying that from the beginning, from the night we met at that party in Lekki, I was collecting. He paused, watched her face. You were the payment arrangement. The warehouse was very quiet. She heard herself breathe. Heard it steady. You never loved me, she said. Did you love me? Yes, she said. Simply. I did. He stood up. Something flickered across his face. Not guilt. Not guilt exactly. A brief, involuntary acknowledgement of something he had chosen not to carry, which was not the same thing as not knowing it existed. Then that's unfortunate, he said. Come home. We finish this quietly. The Korean man walks away. You come back to Lagos. The debt is considered cleared. Stella looked at him for a long time. Then she said, the man you're threatening is going to take apart everything you have built. And I am going to watch. Alex studied her. Something in him assessed the change, the weight in her voice, the specific quality of her stillness. He had seen that change before in people who passed a certain threshold. He had never seen it in her. He didn't like it. Then we wait for him, Alex said. Jaewook arrived at the warehouse at 11:47 p.m. There were 11 of them. Stella counted the sounds from the room where they were keeping her. Movement, impact, the specific percussion of a space being cleared methodically, efficiently, with the cold precision of men who had done this before and found no drama in it. Then the door opened. Miho first. Then two others. Then Jaewook. He walked in with his long dark hair still tied back. He looked at the zip ties on her wrists first, then at her face. He crossed to her, crouched in front of her, and cut the ties himself with a folding knife from his inside pocket. He did it without looking at his hands. He was looking at her face. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No." "Are you certain?" "Jaewook. I'm okay." He held her eyes for one more second. Then he stood, and the quality of him shifted, the Stella-facing version of him folding itself away, the other version stepping forward, the one that had cleared the building before she'd heard a single voice raised. Alex was brought in. He was not in good condition, which Stella noted without pleasure and without particular sorrow. Two men held his arms. His dreads were loose and his confidence was architectural damage, still standing but no longer load-bearing. He looked at Jaewook. Then he looked at Stella. "This is a mistake," he said. "Ara," Jaewook said. "I know." His voice was pleasant. That was the most frightening thing about it. "당신이 실수를 했습니다." You made the mistake. Miho translated in a murmur to no one in particular. Alex looked at Stella. "You chose this. You understand that." Stella looked back at him. 3 years of her life in that face. 3 years of diminishment and misdirection, and a love she had given in full to a transaction she didn't know she was part of. She felt it, all of it, and let it be felt, let it move through her, let it become the specific past tense thing it now was. "I chose this," she said. "Yes." Alex's jaw tightened. He looked at Jaewook. Something moved in him, the final calculation of a man who still believes an exit exists, if only he can find the angle. He shifted his weight. His right arm moved. His hand came up with the gun. He did not point it at Jaewook. He pointed it at Stella. The room went still in the particular way rooms do when violence becomes specific and personal. "If I can't have the money," Alex said, his voice stripped down to its essential nature at last. No charm, no warmth, just the cold arithmetic of a man who had always measured everything in terms of loss and gain. Then nobody gets anything. The shock came before Stella fully understood it was coming. But something else came first. Jaewook moved. She would replay it later, would replay it for the rest of her life. The way he turned. Not away from the gun. Toward her. His body pivoting on pure instinct so that his back came between the barrel and her chest, his arm coming around her simultaneously, pulling her into him. The bullet finding his left shoulder and passing through into the space below his clavicle before anyone had exhaled. He went down slowly. She went down with him, caught him, both hands on his chest, his weight leaning into her as his knees met the warehouse floor. They were kneeling together. His head dropped forward. She could feel through her palms the warmth spreading fast and wrong. No. The word came out of her before she knew she had made it. "No, Jaewook." His eyes found hers. There was no panic in them. There was, instead, something that looked almost like relief, the expression of a man who has just confirmed something he'd been uncertain of. "Kinchanaya," he said softly. "You're okay." His hand came up, found her face. His fingers were warm and left a print on her cheek that she would not let anyone remove for the remainder of that night. "You don't get to leave me." The words came from someplace below language. She was both hands on his chest now, pressing hard, the pressure entirely inadequate and entirely necessary. "You hear me? Don't you dare. You do not get to leave me." His eyes closed. "Jaewook." She screamed it. Screamed it at the warehouse ceiling, at the indifferent Korean dark, at the god she'd been negotiating with on behalf of unworthy men for years. "Call an ambulance." No. No. Miho was already on the phone. He was kneeling on the other side. His face was doing something that she noted and filed, a guilt that was older than tonight, a specific quality of responsibility that had nothing to do with what had just happened and everything to do with something that had happened before it. But she couldn't attend to that now. She couldn't attend to anything except the warmth leaving Jaewook's body and her two hands doing everything they could to keep it in. The ambulance came. She rode with him, one hand on his, the other pressed against the bandaging the paramedics had done. She talked to him the whole way, not prayers, not commands, just talking. The way you talk to someone you are not willing to lose. Ordinary things, the things you would have said tomorrow morning over coffee if tomorrow morning had not been threatened. She told him about the river this morning. She told him Adiz was on her way. She told him what she had decided to name the baby if it was a boy. "Kwame," she said. Kwame Jaiwook Fashidemi Kwan. She watched his face. Both of us. Both worlds. Something neither of us could burn down alone. His face was still. Machines breathed for him. Soul moved past the ambulance windows, indifferent and enormous. Come back, she said quietly. Please. I'm not finished needing you. The ICU was white and cold and smelled of machinery. Stella didn't sleep for 63 hours. She read to him. She hummed, low, under her breath, the Yoruba lullabies her mother had used when she was small, when the world was safe. She told him things she had not told another living person. She held his hand and felt the specific aliveness of his pulse and rebuilt herself around that small rhythmic fact. Miho came on the second day. He sat across from her in the waiting corridor. He looked at the floor for a long time. I need to tell you something, he said. She waited. Alex, the night of the warehouse. I allowed a path to be cleared. For him to leave through a side exit. He stopped. Suyeon had been building leverage on me for 6 months. I thought he stopped again. I am telling you because you deserve to know. And because I made a different decision after. When they brought you out of the building. I chose differently. She looked at him. I know, she said quietly. He looked up at her. I'm not going to pretend, she said, that I'm not angry. But I know. She paused. Go home. Sleep. Come back when you can look me in the eye without guilt doing most of the work. He did something she hadn't expected. His eyes filled. He nodded once. Got up. Left. On the morning of the 4th day, the doors opened. She heard the change before she saw it, the way the energy in the room shifted, the way the nurses straightened, the way even the morning light seemed to renegotiate its terms. Chairman Kwan walked in. She had not met him. She knew him immediately. Jaiwook in 30 more years with the warmth removed and the power made completely explicit. Billionaire posture. Suit that made apologies to no one. Eyes that moved across the room and landed on Stella with the specific weight of a man deciding the category of a thing before he had been introduced to it. He took in the scene, his son unconscious in the bed, machines, white sheets, and a black Nigerian woman in a coat she hadn't changed in 4 days, sitting in the chair beside him with her hand on his. He spoke in Korean to his men. They moved toward her. 들어오지 마세요. Do not come in here. She didn't know the words, but she read their intention perfectly, and she stood. Remove her, Chairman Kwan said. Try, she said. His men were larger than she was. They were 4. She fought anyway, because that was what she did, what she had always done, because the alternative was to be moved by the hands of men who had decided her location without her consent, and that was a thing she was no longer available for. She fought and shouted and called Jaiwook's name, and the doors swung her through them, and she was in the corridor on her knees. Adiz was running down the hallway. The ICU doors closed. Stella was on the corridor floor. The fluorescent lights above her were the honest, indifferent kind. Same as the pharmacy. Same as the warehouse. The same light in every room where her life rearranged itself without asking permission. She looked up at the closed doors. Something came together in her. Not fury, not grief. Something past those. Something that had been building since a club in Lagos, since a bathroom floor, since a warehouse where a man took a bullet to put himself between her and everything that had been trying to reach her. She stood up. She walked to the doors. She put her hand on them. And she said it loud, clear, into the corridor, into the room beyond the glass, into the city beyond the building, into the specific frequency at which the dead man you love is most likely to still be listening. I am pregnant with your son's child. Inside the ICU, Chairman Kwan turned. The doctors turned. The machines kept their rhythm. Kept their cold, impartial count. And then, a hand on white sheets. Fingers moving. Barely. Just enough. A head turning. Slow. The specific slowness of someone ascending from a very great depth, from the bottom of a dark, freezing ocean toward the surface, toward a sound, toward a voice that had been reaching for him across the whole dark distance between one world and the next. His eyes opened. They were unfocused first. Then the focus arrived in stages. Ceiling light, his father's face, none of these the thing he was looking for. Then the doors. Then through the glass Stella. On her knees in the corridor. Head bowed. Hands covering her face. His mouth moved. The doctor leaned in. Pyeori. Stella. The Korean name he had given her in his own private language, the one she didn't know about yet, the one that meant star. Then in English, barely a sound, barely more than breath, the word that had been true since a corridor in Lagos when she grabbed his lapel with both hands and said, "Don't let them take me." Stella. She heard it. She heard it through the glass and through the doors and through the 63 hours of no sleep and through the 3 years of a man who had never once said her name like it was something he was glad to have in his mouth. She looked up. Through the glass, she could see him. Eyes open. Looking directly at her. his father frozen where he stood. The doctors already moving, calling, equipment responding. And Jaiwook, with the specific authority of a man who has returned from somewhere and found exactly the reason he returned, looking at her like she was the only coordinate that mattered on any map. Adiz, besides Stella on the corridor floor, made a sound that was not a word. Just sound. The sound the human body makes when it has no word large enough for what it is feeling. Stella pressed both hands flat against the glass. He raised one hand from the bed. Barely an inch. But toward her. Months later. Seoul in late autumn. The Hangang River running gray-green below the penthouse. The city doing what cities do, continuing regardless. Jaiwook stood in the living room with his long dark hair loose around his shoulders and Kwame Jaiwook Fashidamikwan in his arms. The baby was 3 weeks old. He was looking at him with the specific expression of a man who has run the most dangerous organization in Seoul and found, to his own evident surprise, that this small, insistent, unremarkable human was the most significant thing that had ever been placed in his hands. He was whispering Korean. Then the broken Yoruba Stella had been teaching him, laughing every time he mispronounced, and he tried again each time without complaint. Parami Purdo, he murmured, even when the wind blows, then in Yoruba, imperfect and earnest. Ifemi. My love. Stella watched him from the doorway. She took out her phone. Typed a message to Adiz. I used to think love was supposed to hurt to be real. That it was supposed to cost you pieces of yourself. That was what I knew. I know now that was never love. That was a man practicing ownership without using the word. Adiz, I am standing in a doorway watching the father of my son teach himself Yoruba because he wants our child to know both of who he is. And I don't have a word for this. I just needed someone to know. She pressed send. 3 seconds. Stella Ifeoma Fashidemi, I am in a grab car in Lagos right now crying in front of a stranger. Do not contact me. Loudly crying face, loudly crying face, loudly crying face. I cannot. Loudly crying face. Jaiwook learning Yoruba? I am not okay. Stella put her phone face down. Pressed her hand to her mouth.